The Two Fridas by Frida Kahlo, oil on canvas, 67 inches by 67 inches. After a successful visit to Paris and New York in the summer of 1939, Kahlo returned home to Mexico, where she received notification that her husband Diego Rivera was divorcing her, filing for divorce in court. Kahlo once said to Rivera a few years ago that her love for him was like blood traveling through vessels from her heart to his. Here, Kahlo uses surgical scissors or pincers to stop the flow of blood between the two of them. At age 6, Frida contracted polio, which caused her right leg to deteriorate somewhat. She wrote many years later how the loneliness and painful convalescence from the disease inspired the second figure. Quote, I experienced intensely an imaginary friendship with a little girl more or less the same age as me. I told her my secret problems. Which ones? I do not remember, but from my voice she knew everything about me. End of quote. Kahlo felt that Diego Rivera never fell out of love with the Mexican image of Frida, which is on the right side of the painting. This image is dressed in a Tehuana skirt and blouse. This Frida has her heart intact and clutches in her lap a miniature portrait of Diego, which, by the way, she kept with her until her death. It was the European Frida, on the other hand, where the bride, wearing a Victorian white dress on the left-hand side of the painting, that Rivera fell out of love with. This Frida has her heart ripped open and allows the blood to drip onto her dress as if it were another illness, trauma, or many surgeries. Kahlo would start dating Rivera again, and they would get married within a few years in the early 1940s. This represents the frugal repast, the second etching made by Pablo Picasso in the early period of his painting career, 1904. It depicts the poverty of a young couple, once identified as circus performers. There is a cramped and angular feeling caused by the shapes of the figures. The drawing is free and tends to be wiry in its appearance. Picasso had studied French and Spanish mannerisms for its spiritual and anxious tenor. We see perhaps the influence of El Greco and Primaticcio from the school of Fontainebleau. But here we note how life is somewhat what you make of it. These two figures huddled together and the spread tablecloth and bottle of wine in one section of the table. The look is one of hard reflection and perhaps resignation, with a tinge of anxiety and uncertainty in this powerful portrait. This large painting is part of a series of several paintings that Anselm Kiefer, a German artist, Kiefer, did at one time in the early 1980s. This painting from 1983 is enormous. It's 10 feet by 10 feet. It's made of oil, emulsion, wood, shellac, latex, paint, straw, all on canvas. Kiefer, a neo-expressionist painter who explored Germany's national identity from its Nordic mythology, of its ancient history to the world wars and the Cold War of its more recent troubled past, is making a powerful statement about art. Here, Kiefer addresses the destruction of art by the Nazis, the National Socialist Party in Germany that led to war, World War II. The scorched landscape that seems like some ancient battlefield from a Nordic saga is thrust forward, charred and marked with red paint, as if it is smoldering still. The painting's space recedes rapidly with perspective that makes us dizzy. The heavy passages of heavy ochre paint slow down this relentless push into the distance. The crumbling and dry strands of straw, actually embedded in the paint, calls our attention to the textured surface of the paint, and it's symbolic of decay since straw perishes rather quickly. Above the landscape, the smeared and dripping paint suggests both a nighttime battle and aerial smoke or falling debris. In the center is a tomb that suggests a memorial. It resembles an architectural blueprint by William Kreis, Kreis, who was Hitler's architect for a tomb to fallen German soldiers that was actually never built. Note how it is a paper woodcut that is actually cut out and attached to the canvas. Perhaps there is also a reference to the bombarding of Hitler's bunker in this rectangular building. Kiefer suggests here that art, though fragile, has the power to transform the burden of a catastrophic past. Kiefer once said, quote, "I do not identify with Nero or Hitler, but I have to reenact what they did just a little bit in order to understand that madness." End of quote. Georges Rouault, The Three Clowns from 1917. Oil on canvas, 41 inches by 29 inches. Born in Belleville, a working-class quarter of Paris, in 1871, to an artisan father who specialized in finishing and varnishing pianos, the young Georges Rouault, at 15 years of age, was apprenticed to a maker of stained glass. He soon earned an income working as an assistant to stained glass maker and window restorer George Hirsch. At 17 years of age, he took evening classes at the School of Decorative Arts, and by 1892 took classes at the prestigious School of Fine Arts in Paris from the famous symbolist painter Gustave Moreau, Moreau, who was teaching at the time. It was here that he met Matisse and others who would become the nucleus of Les Fauves, Fauves, infamously known as the Wild Beasts, by their salon entries of 1904-1905. Although he only sent 3 works to the famous Fall Salon of 1905 in Paris, Rouault was immediately identified with the Fauve artists and their style. Another important influence on Rouault was the radical Catholic French writer Léon Bloy, B-L-O-Y, who confirmed for Rouault his own disgust with the rampant materialism, greed, and callousness of the ruling classes in contemporary French society. Like Bloy, Rouault found sympathy and truth in the most unlikely places, among the outcasts of society, the prostitutes, the clowns, and members of the traveling fairs and circuses. Rouault found the human condition hidden behind the mockery of the clown's makeup. It is, quote, ourselves, all of us, end of quote, Rouault once exclaimed. He also felt that the figure of the clown was like that of Christ when he was mocked and scourged by the Romans. Here we see the sadness and commiseration of 3 figures, 2 of whom lean on support of the powerful central figure. Like the Fauve style, this painting seems cramped, with heavy, dark outlines, rapidly painted, and strong, somber tones that seem to bleed into the background. Rouault himself, even though he had commissions from dealers and was for a short period curator of the Moreau Museum, Rouault could not escape poverty from time to time, so felt the bitter poverty that he expressed in some of his figures. This is Van Gogh's Starry Night, famous painting from June of 1889. This scene of the village of San Remi at night, with the powerful night sky and the constellation of Orion, perhaps the evening star Venus in the right-hand side, was painted from the second-story window of his apartment in the village of San Remi, close to the asylum where he had recently recuperated from his mental breakdown in the late fall and winter of 1888-1889. In the sky, we see unreal orange-colored moon, as if joined to the sun. We see a band of light, perhaps suggesting a Milky Way, a progression of stars floating in the distance. Below, we see the pointed tower of the church spire as it cuts across into the sky, and the larger image of the cypress at nighttime with its powerful and fluent silhouette. The cypress tree was a symbol of death and resurrection in Mediterranean countries for a long time. This painting represents Van Gogh's desire or fear of the infinite in nature. He said on at least 2 occasions of his letters, "I want to paint my starry night." So this was a painting that he wanted to paint at different times. Van Gogh said that after death, people journey to a star where they continue to live on. So you can see his feeling for eternity and immortality expressed in the grandeur and boldness of the stars as they move and scintillate across the nighttime sky with powerful complementary colors and thick impasto paint.